I was cruising on Reddit again. Let's get into it. I just love Reddit because it's kind of like a place where I go to sharpen the old mental knives. I ran across this post. Just opened my first LLC, already facing unemployment issues. Please help. I just opened an LLC last month since I bought a truck to do trucking. I made the mistake of hiring family and hired my deadbeat cousin who needed a job and to move in with me as a broker to find routes. My route started having problems as soon as 1 weekend with all of the COVID issues, and on top of that, my truck broke down. I'm completely halted, and with all the arguments with him, I had to let him go after the first week. He threatened to file unemployment and then appeared to be approved. What legal recourse can I take against him? What damages can this bring to me? I can't have any more issues at this point in my life. My truck is completely broken down first weekend, and the pandemic is ruining my business. On and on and on. So this guy needs some advice. He has some questions. May I make a suggestion? I did a video on hiring family members, good or bad idea, and it's posted here. So please watch that. Anytime you refer to someone as a deadbeat anything, that is a big no-no. If the person was a stranger, a deadbeat stranger, would you hire a deadbeat stranger, a deadbeat applicant, a deadbeat engineer? In the real world, you wouldn't do that. So if you go to hire family members, make sure deadbeat is not in front of their description, because I can tell you right now, that would be a bad hire. Next, is there any legal recourse you can take against him? The short answer is no. You can't take any recourse against someone who files unemployment against you. You hired him, he was an employee, it didn't work out, you let him go, and he filed unemployment. What damages can this bring to me? Well, not a whole lot. In the state of Texas, unemployment benefits are computed, and this is very glossed over. There are formulas for all of this, but in the state of Texas, unemployment benefits are calculated by dividing earnings by the highest paid quarter. He only worked for you for a week, so it's probably no harm, no foul. But with that being said, it's not going to cost you any money. Your company does not pay the state of Texas or the Texas Workforce Commission, and then the Workforce Commission pays your deadbeat cousin. You pay into the pot. Everyone pays into the pot. Well, every legal business pays into the Texas Workforce Commission every quarter when you file your quarterly C3 taxes. So your tax rate may or may not go up. You just got into business, but now you're out of the business because your truck broke. So I don't see any damages being brought against you and your business. My advice would be, please don't hire people described as deadbeats. And please watch my video on hiring friends and family if it's a good or bad idea. Even when you hire people that you know, even when you hire family members, please do all your due diligence as though it was a stranger you don't know. Just because you hire a family member doesn't mean that you take shortcuts in verifying their level of expertise, skill, and experience. And I hope by now that your truck is fixed and things are going well for you and your business. Biometrics refers to any identifiers unique to an individual. If your company is thinking about using employee fingerprints, retinas, or facial recognition in its HR department or anywhere else, understand the biometric privacy laws in your state. As of the posting of this video, Texas, Illinois, and Washington have active biometric privacy laws, but New York and Maryland are currently working on passing biometric privacy laws. Before implementing any type of biometric program at your company, be sure to do your homework. Research the laws in your state and any upcoming bills being discussed by lawmakers. I recommend being proactive. Even if there is not a biometric law in your state, I suggest that your company inform employees in writing that biometric information or identifiers are going to be collected and stored. Let your employees know the specific reason for collecting the biometric information. How long will your company keep and use this information? Finally, obtain a written release from each employee. Here are 10 of the biggest mistakes small businesses make. Lacking clear company goals, not rewarding great job performance, letting staff be fearful of management, not having clear leadership, assuming good workers make good leaders, requiring approval for everything, failure to communicate expectations, being myopic when hiring, limited or no staff development, not investing in training. A conflict of interest policy should include at least the following considerations. The employee owes a duty of loyalty to the company. At all times when on duty, without regard to time or place, employees should devote their full attention to the company's business and their duties. An employee must avoid any activity that conflicts with the interests of the company. An employee must disclose a potential conflict in advance. Outside employment is prohibited unless approved by the employer in advance. The company will deny permission for such outside employment if at any point it adversely affects the employee's ability, fitness, or readiness for work. It is generally inadvisable to flatly prohibit all outside employment. Many people work 2 or 3 jobs. The real concern should be with outside work that interferes with the employee's ability to be a good employee for the employer. How do employers pay for benefits like PTO and vacation?
Let's get into it.
I would like to thank YouTuber Religion Free for submitting the following question. Hello, how do employers budget to pay PTO, holiday, or vacation? That question is not as simple as it sounds. I'm going to answer your question, but also there is something equally as important to consider. Proactive companies budget in advance for employee compensation. That includes things like employee salaries, employer taxes, bonuses, 401k, unemployment insurance, federal, state, local taxes, depending on where your business resides, on and on and on. Employment compensation is typically set aside in a company payroll account. I advise companies to set aside as much money as possible in their company payroll account. Once employment compensation is set aside, your company will tap into that payroll account for payroll plus any covered paid absences, including PTO, vacation, and holiday pay. Other major considerations should include lost productivity. For example, did you cross-train employees to perform the work of the vacationing employee? Will you, the business owner, stay later to perform the vacationing employee's work? Lost profitability. When you hire an employee, that employee's purpose is to help make the company money. Each employee hired should be able to earn his or her compensation plus overhead and profit for the company. Employees on vacation do not earn profit for the company, so you must create a strategy as to how you will recoup this loss. When the employee is gone, for whatever reason, your company loses money unless you plan ahead. It may be a good idea for your company's internal financial and HR departments to establish written policies and processes as to how paid time off and payroll are managed so both departments can smoothly work together. Viewer question: Can a manager change a job description to requiring a degree even if you were hired before the change in job description? Yes. According to the Texas Workforce Commission, employers may develop and change personnel policies, reassign employees, and change such things as work locations, schedules, job titles, job descriptions, pay, and other aspects of jobs at will. Viewer question: can you talk about the proper way to demote an employee? I'll start out by saying that any manager faced with demoting an employee should not do it with negative personal feelings, leave the employee to feel as though they've been singled out, or make the employee feel belittled or humiliated, especially in front of others. I have to make some assumptions here, so we're going to assume that the company has done the following. Hired a qualified applicant. The new hire did receive a written job description and acknowledge that they understand the duties and expectations of the position. If initial training was promised, I must assume that the training has been done, that the employee who did get the training received a satisfactory job performance review as a benchmark. The company has to have a written policy on demoting an employee. The employee should be made aware of that policy, and they acknowledge that they received the policy and they understand it and they were able to ask questions. Now, back to the question. Can you talk about the proper way to demote an employee? This is how I would do it. My way is not the only way, but I think it would be a fair way. And we would start out with those assumptions in the beginning. If the manager sees any deficiencies in the employee's job performance, I think management should start documenting it, and management should not wait until the deficiencies become major. I would schedule a short meeting with the employee and we would talk about the job deficiencies that I noticed, and it would be just a casual conversation. It wouldn't be any type of verbal warning. Employee X, I've noticed you made a number of mistakes this past month. Is there something the company can do to help you reduce the chance of making future errors at work? Something along those lines. Now, when you do something like this, I would hope that the employee would feel like as though they're not being singled out. And I would also hope that management would do this to any employee who they believe is experiencing some type of job deficiency, not just single out someone because you have some type of personal issue with that person. If the employee continues to show deficiencies on the job, I would ask for a more formal meeting with the employee, with the sole purpose of this meeting being a verbal warning, letting the employee know that their job deficiencies are continuing, and you would have some sort of benchmarks, job performance evaluation of some kind. Whatever those job duties and descriptions were, I would make sure I had those job descriptions written here, and I would have some type of performance evaluation here and show how the two are not meeting. If the employee has an explanation of how or of why they are being deficient in their job duties, I would listen to it, but at the same time, I would make sure that the employee was aware that this is a formal meeting and that it would be a verbal warning. If the company feels that the employee needs training, at this point, I would enact training. I would buddy the individual with a more experienced employee who can guide the individual and provide that training with some oversight by management. At this time, if with all of this, if the employee continues to show deficiencies, continues to not be able to perform those essential functions on that job description, then I would have to look at other options, either move the person to another job or, unfortunately, demote the employee. Now, if you have to do any of these things, demote the employee or transfer them to another job with less responsibilities, I would make sure this will be documented as a form of discipline. In an average scenario, if the job isn't critical or no lives are at stake, I would let this go on for up to 90 days. And that would be 90 days between my first non-formal meeting to me actually having to demote the person. If the employee falls incredibly flat as it relates to not being able to perform the job, then of course I would demote that individual a lot sooner. With all of this being said, please do not use demotion as a stalling tactic for terminating an employee. From an employee standpoint, a demotion is a kick in the teeth, and you've pretty much zapped all of the confidence that person is going to have with regard to doing the job or even improving the job. If the person isn't doing the job and you don't have any other positions that person can go in, please just terminate, let the person go on with their life, let the business go on with its life, and save a little dignity and some time with regard to that individual. This is just a general outline as to how I would handle a demotion. Personally, I've never demoted an employee. If the person doesn't do the job, I typically terminate to save time. But this answer is based on just an open-end question. If you've ever had to demote an employee, if you're an employee that ever had to be demoted, please leave your experience in the comment section below. I would love to hear how the experience was like for you. And I'm talking both employer and employee. Just doing this video, it just gives me cringes. And I hope I don't ever have to demote an employee.
Disclaimers in an offer letter, employment agreement, and/or employee handbook can help employers avoid contractual liability toward at-will employees. Disclaimers should prove the following. 1. The employee handbook is not a contract. 2. The employee handbook may not be modified except by certain specified procedures and by certain company officials. And 3. The employee handbook does not alter the employment at will status.
Let's talk about employment gaps on a job applicant's application and why employment gaps may not always be so bad. Grab a cup of coffee. Let's get into it. This video idea came from YouTuber Employee of the Month. Employee of the Month, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch one of my prior videos and leave this wonderful comment. And instead of talking about a flurry of stories where I can tell you that despite
Of an employment gap, I hired someone and they turned out to be this wonderful, dependable employee, what I'd like to do instead is
help you as an employer or a decision maker by letting you inside my head, which could be dangerous by the way, and tell you my thought process, what I'm thinking as a business operations manager when I see an employee who on paper seems to be great, but they've got employment gaps. When you have a job applicant that has employment gaps, that means that you've got work to do. And this is where it helps to have your company's HR processes written and in place so that you will be able to quickly and efficiently separate the good candidates from the candidates your company would rather pass on. Having your HR foundation in place can help you save a lot of time and money as it relates to verifying employment, knowing what questions to ask, on and on and on. Before I get into my thought processes as it relates to hiring someone with employment gaps, please know that this information may not work for your company if you do not have the proper policies and procedures and processes in place. That includes establishing your company's HR foundation, clear job descriptions, fine print on your in-house job applications, and I'm going to put a link to a video that will help you with that right here. Obtaining authorizations from job applicants that will allow you to speak with prior employers and obtain important information. Creating your company's employee handbook. All of this should be in place before you hire your first employee. First, I would require that potential job candidate to fill out your company's in-house job application, including the fine print at the bottom. When you're looking at the completed job application, scan that application, look at the length of time they spent at their prior employers. Did the applicant hold similar positions within that person's career path? If so, how long? How many employment gaps do you see? What is the length of each employment gap within that application? I would schedule a preliminary phone interview with that applicant, especially if I thought they had some possibilities of being qualified for the position that I was looking to fill. Now, during that preliminary telephone interview, I would not get into too many details as it relates to what you are looking for to fill the position. This would just be a fact-finding phone call. Mainly, I would look into things like why that person had so many employment gaps. When they give you an answer, I would not go into detail with regard to why they're giving you that specific answer as their reason for having these employment gaps. That's something you save for the in-person interview. Now, you've already contacted the person, they're here sitting in front of you, and you're ready to conduct your in-depth interview. In between employment gaps, I would ask that person, what have you been doing since your last job? When you ask someone a question like this, it is up to you as an HR person or a manager or a business owner. Do not accept 1 or 2 word statements. Well, I was looking for a job during that time. I would be looking for something along the lines of, while I was in between jobs, I was professionally networking on LinkedIn. I was watching YouTube videos to help me improve on my skills. I was scanning the Workforce Commission's website looking for employment. If the applicant regularly changed jobs, in addition to having employment gaps, i.e. job hopper, link for that video right here. Again, inquire as to why this person consistently changed jobs and do not accept 1 or 2 word answers. Better opportunity, more pay. Inquire about the specific job duties that were expected, the tone of management, company culture at the prior employers. I would ask the job applicant to self-critique themselves. Would you hire you? Again, don't accept 1 or 2 word answers. If that person says, yes, I would hire me, I would like them to go into depth as to why they would hire themselves. Ask the individual, why do they believe they are not employed at this time? Why do they have these employment gaps? This is where you'll be able to drill down and ask even more specific questions as they come to mind. Drill down on the core job skills your applicant will need to fill your available position. And ask the applicant, has any of their skills deteriorated during this employment gap? If they say yes or no, does your company have in place any type of skills test? Most important, ask if the applicant would be willing to sign your company's authorization that will allow you or your HR team to contact the prior employer, and ask that prior employer to submit to an interview and include any documented employment evaluations, attendance issues, or any other issues related to that employee while they were employed at that company. And I'll tell you one thing that will help you as an employer get truthful information. Here's a great question. Will I regret hiring you? Always ask why or why not, and please do not settle for 1 to 2 word answers. When looking at job applicants with employment gaps, there's a lot that you must take into consideration. It's easy to tell someone to hit the bricks as soon as you see an employment gap. Dismiss the myth that hiring someone with an employment gap is a bad thing, because it's not.
The Department of Labor administers and enforces more than 180 federal laws. These mandates and the regulations that implement them cover many workplace activities for about 10 million employers and 125 million workers. Let's review some of the basic employment laws. Some employers are not covered by all of the various Texas and federal employment laws that exist. It is super important for business owners to know which laws apply to their respective company. In this video, I'm going to discuss a list of just some of the most important employment-related laws with a glossed over description. For more information about these and other employment laws, I recommend you research the statutes and regulations yourself or contact your licensed employment attorney. If you have just one or more employee, these laws apply to your company. Employers are liable under this statute for even one worker, whether it's an employee or an independent contractor. It protects against race and color discrimination. The Employment, Retirement, Income, and Securities Act covers any employer with an employee involved in commerce. ERISA protects benefit rights of employees. So if your company has a pension or a retirement plan, it must make it available to any employee who works at least 1,000 hours in a 12-month period. The Fair Labor Standards Act prescribes standards for wages and overtime pay, which affect most private and public employment. This act is administered by the Wage and Hour Division. It requires employers to pay employees at the minimum wage established by the federal government. In addition, employers are required to pay overtime pay of 1 1/2 times the regular rate of pay. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, covers employers with an employee involved in commerce. An employer is required to furnish each employee a place of employment which is free from recognized hazards and shall comply with occupational safety and health standards. Some entities are excluded, like the post office. Let me stop right here to define commerce. The term interstate commerce is so broadly defined that practically anything fits. Ordering, loading, using supplies from out of state, accepting payments from customers based on credit cards issued by out-of-state banks, and so on. Texas and federal new hire reporting laws. Any employer with an employee must comply with this law no matter your company's size. Under the federal law, each employer must report each newly hired employee to the State Directory of New Hires. Texas payday law. Any private sector employer must comply with this law. This law ensures the minimum wage laws are followed. Wages and overtime wages are paid in a timely manner, and there are no illegal deductions taken out of an employee's pay. This law has to do with a former employee's ability to collect unemployment benefits. The definitions for both are almost identical. Any employee who is paid wages of $1,500 or more during any calendar quarter and in the calendar year or preceding calendar year falls under these laws. If you have between 2 to 50 employees, these laws, in addition, apply to you. The Small Employer Health Insurance Availability Act, or the Texas COBRA law, requires health benefit continuation rights for employees and their beneficiaries of company health plans if the company has between 2 and 50 employees. The state law is very similar to the federal law, but with a shorter benefit continuation period. The law does not apply if the employee was terminated for gross misconduct, but the burden of proving that is on the employer. Employers, please note, if you promise COBRA rights that do not exist, your company may be obligated to extend coverage. If you have 4 or more employees, these laws apply to you. This law prohibits employers from hiring and employing an individual for employment in the U.S. knowing that the individual is not authorized to work in the U.S. In addition, employers are also prohibited from continuing to employ an individual knowing that he or she is not authorized for employment. In other words, no employer can hire anyone, including a U.S. citizen, without verifying identity and employment authorization on Form I-9. If you have 15 or more employees, these laws apply to you. Title VII prohibits discrimination against race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, GINA, protects employees against discrimination based on their genetic information in both health insurance and employment. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in employment and other areas. If you have 50 or more employees, this law applies to you. The Family Medical Leave Act states employees must be eligible employees in order to take FMLA protected leave. Eligible employee is defined as anyone who has worked for at least 12 months at your company, has worked at least 1,250 hours during that 12-month period before the leave, works at a facility where there are at least 50 employees within a 75-mile radius, and has a qualifying family or medical leave event. Due to the 1,250-hour requirement, this is one of the few laws that potentially screen out some part-time employees from eligibility. It is important to know which laws apply to your company since coverage involves the imposition of important duties your company must satisfy. These are just some of the most important employment-related statutes. My explanations of these super important statutes are very glossed over. For more information on any of these laws, contact a licensed employment attorney. Employers may elect to pay wages via direct deposit to employees who maintain suitable bank accounts, as long as a 60-day advance notice is given if this is a new program. Also, the employer will need to obtain whatever information is required by the employee's bank. Under the Texas payday law, wage payments by debit card would have to be approved by the employee in writing. With that being said, watch out. Debit cards that result in a fee to the employee each time they are used could easily be seen as de facto deductions from wages. That might cause problems under the Texas payday law and would cause problems under federal minimum wage laws for those who are paid at or near minimum wage. But can you force an employee to enroll in payroll direct deposit? Federal law clearly states that an employer may not require an employee to accept direct deposit of wages at certain financial institutions. For more information, visit the state employment agency where your business resides.
Is a job application necessary when an applicant submits a resume? Let's get into it. This was another question I received from the same person who asked, should she, as an employer, request that applicants complete a job application in addition to submitting their resume? The short answer, is a job application necessary? My 2 cents, of course it is, and there are many reasons why, and that's what this video is about. You have the job applications that come from the office supply stores and you see them on a pad. They're about $10, and remember, you pay for what you get. Some of those job applications may not protect your company in certain situations. Not only that, That job application may not be asking the right questions. It may be asking for information that your company really isn't ready to start collecting. The information on that job application may conflict with laws that are governing your state, your city, any city ordinances. So with that being said, my advice is to create your own job applications. Using a job application instead of exclusively a resume standardizes the information for all applicants. If you want to look and compare things like education and experience, you know which page to go to on that job application for each and every employee, as opposed to fishing around for it on resumes. You can see the applicant's complete professional picture in the same format. Your job application will cover information that is not covered by the applicant's resume. For example, why did you leave your last employer? Former supervisors' complete information, including telephone numbers and address to the former employer. A well-written job application should verify understanding. In other words, the employee will sign a document stating that they have read and understood whatever policies and procedures that you have written in your job application. In addition, that signature can attest to certain statements. A statement claiming that the person submitting the information attests to the fact that the information is true and correct. And also that applicant, again, with that signature, that they understand that if they submit false information, that they may no longer be considered as an applicant for that position, or if they are hired and it is found out later that the information was untrue, that they could face disciplinary action, whatever your company sees fit, demotion, termination, or whatever. That will be spelled out in your customized job application. The EEOC requires certain guidelines with regard to how long your organization should keep solicited job applications on file. So please keep that in mind whenever you collect job applications, and refrain from collecting information such as social security numbers and driver's licenses, because at the end of the day, it is your company that will be responsible for securing that information, and you could be held liable if that information is compromised. Does your company have a customized job application, or do you use the generic applications at the office supply stores?
Is your company required to pay severance to employees who leave your company? Under the Texas payday law rules, severance pay is defined as additional pay given to an employee at the end of that employee's tenure with your company. Typically, but not always, severance amounts are based on some sort of formula like length of employment. It is a payment that the employer has somehow obligated itself to pay, either voluntarily, orally, or in writing. For example, in an offer letter of employment, your company may state that if the employee's job comes to an end for reasons other than misconduct, the company will provide X amount of dollars in severance compensation. Unlike wages in lieu of notice, which is a post-termination payment that an employer has never previously obligated itself to give, severance pay that is promised in a written policy or other written form is an enforceable part of the wage agreement under the Texas Workforce Commission's Labor Law Department. In other words, if you communicate in writing that your company will provide a severance pay, it will be enforced under Texas law. In the state of Texas, no company is obligated to offer severance pay to any employee. I recommend that an employment policy is written that states that only the business owner can make any sort of promise to compensate an employee severance pay or any other form of compensation.
If you want to know more about business operations, business management, human resources, and other topics related to running a business, click on one of those play links. Click on one of these click on the playlist.
One eternity later.
Click on